Okay, I think everybody's almost here, so let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot to cover today. I think we can get it done within an hour, but if it runs over, just be prepared and don't forget this will be recorded and on my YouTube channel later today. So if you have to drop off for prior commitments, then you'll be able to catch the end later on. So let's get started. So we're here today to talk about Dynamics CRM Workflows. So this is an introduction. And so there's lots and lots to talk about as far as workflows go. So we're just going to cover the very basics today. And then in another webinar, we'll get into the more specifics of stuff because this is a very, very broad topic. And we're only going to be covering workflows today, not the dialogues or the other things that are part of the process system within Dynamics CRM. So my name is Mitch Milam. If you have never heard of me, and you're here, so I appreciate your time and attendance today. I am a dynamic CRM architect. I'm an independent consultant trainer. You can reach me at mitch@xrmcoaches.com. My main blog for the moment is at infinite-x.net. That will be moved into XRM Coaches here in the next few months as I consolidate some of my blog properties into a single blog. And of course, I'm on Twitter at Mitch Milam. A little bit of housekeeping here today. So everybody's muted so that we don't interfere with anyone. But if you need to ask a question, there's a couple ways to do it. First off is you can raise your hand. That's with the little hand icon on the step B there. And then feel free to put questions into the question box or into the chat window. I have both of those in my other monitor. I'm monitoring those, and I'll look at them occasionally and see if we need to stop and do things. We're going to have some discussions at the end and some Q&A, but as we're going along, if you have questions, please feel free to ask, and we'll handle it like that. And again, this is being recorded, so it'll be up on YouTube later today. So if you missed anything, you can always go back and see it again. So future events, I have a workshop for Dynamics CRM Online Administrators. So that is next Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. I know a couple of people have already signed up, so we have plenty of room left. So basically, we're going to be covering a lot more than what we're covering today with as far as some of the maintenance aspects of this. And basically anything that you want to do related to that is just drop me an email if you have any questions on this at all. Then 2 weeks from now, we have another free webinar on Friday, the 19th, and this one is going to be discussing web form design. Is it art or is it science? So hang on 1 second. Question to answer here. Okay. So here's my training roadmap. If you've already been to the other webinars, then you've probably seen this at least once. So you can access my webinars through the xrmcoaches.com/webinars page. I'm currently working to redo my site, so if things show up very strangely, it's because I'm in mid-process there. So that'll go on for the next month or so as I kind of redo things. I have a knowledge system that I call Knowledge Bits, and what this will do is it will email you a tip on a specific topic, what I call a channel. So currently like .NET development, which I'm still in progress on. Then I have administration, JavaScript, training things, stuff like that. So that'll email you once a day until it runs out of things. I've got some learning plans coming soon. That'll be delivered. I'm a bit late on that. That's more of a job than I thought. And this is just I want to know how to do some things within Dynamics CRM. What is the path I need to take to be proficient on that? And then more things are coming this year. So practice tests, got some on-demand video training, my instructor-led courses, and then I have the following books that are currently in development. It's a race between administration and plugin development about which one will be finished first. I'm actually working on both at the same time, which is probably a bad idea, but that's just kind of the way it worked out. And then I'll have an update to my security deep dive book that's already in publication right now, updated for 2016 and beyond. And then the fourth one is Query Strategies, which is a book for developers to discuss how to actually query CRM using the different programmatic methods we have. Hang on 1 second, please. Okay. Sorry, asking questions here. So what we're covering today is the basics of creating a workflow, the properties and steps, troubleshooting and management, and then some additional resources that I'll be sending out later as a summary to this. So let's talk about what workflows are themselves. So a workflow is the ability within Dynamics CRM to actually automate a repetitive task. Okay, it can be done automatically, it can be done manually, or both. So in other words, you can have a workflow executed automatically when a certain condition exists or a specific action has happened, or you can do it by hand by just selecting the record or records and then clicking the Run Workflow button and selecting the workflow. The main idea is it allows non-developers to create business processes that enhance the actual productivity of the users within the system. You can also extend these actions with custom workflow activities, which is what developers write, and they just fit into the system. And once they're inside the system, they can be used just like the normal steps that are built in. So the main idea behind workflows is if you have a process that you perform either on a periodic basis, or you would like things done the same every time, that's why you would automate it with a workflow. The key to this is you have to know your processes in order to automate your processes. That's the key takeaway here. You can't just go start throwing automation at stuff that you don't understand or you don't have fully and clearly documented. It just doesn't work very well. So workflows can be created by anyone with the proper level of security access. And while the ability for out of the box for users to create their own workflows has existed since workflows have been in existence, I have actually really never seen anyone who is not an administrator actually create a workflow. I'm not sure anybody else has, but by default, you can create workflows for yourself, but I've never seen anybody actually do that at any of my customers. And, I've been doing this for 10 years. So the capabilities there is just probably the knowledge level, or maybe even the access has not been provided for people. The key thing about a workflow or any of the processes is when you're working on them, they're in a draft state, and they stay that way until you physically push a button that says activate these. So once they're activated, you can then use them. Until then, they pretty much don't exist to anybody but the person developing them. So to create a process, and this is the same dialog we use for all of our processes, not just workflows, we get this dialog box and we just type in a name, we select a category and then specify the entity, and then choose if it's going to be starting from a scratch using a blank process, or if it's going to start from a template, which is a predefined workflow that you've already created. So the name is just a text field, of course. Action can be an action, which is a custom. It's a way to create a custom piece of code that can be used later in the system. We'll talk about that another time. Business process flows, dialogues, and finally the workflows that we'll cover today. You specify an entity, and then again, you can specify from blank or from template. So a process template, again, is nothing more than another workflow that you've defined as a template. And the idea here is it gives you a starting point to create another workflow. But to be quite honest, I've actually never put this into practice. If anybody else has, let me know. I'd like to hear what you have to say later. But yeah, I've never actually used this because generally when you create a workflow, it's going to be so specific to what you're doing that by creating a template, you're not really gaining anything at all. At least that's been my experience. So I've never had anybody else use it either, quite honestly. So in other words, I've never seen a process template in the wild, put it that way. So here are the main properties, and as you can see, you can change the name once it's created. You can activate it as a process or a process template we just discussed. You can never ever change the entity or the category, which defines how it's actually created. So once you create one, like for the lead, you're stuck with it. If you need to create one for the contact, you have to create another one. What you could do in certain cases, I've never actually tried this recently, is you might be able to save this as a template and then change the entity, but I haven't actually tried that, so I'm not sure it'll work. So again, the name can be changed, and that's pretty much it. So the available to run section on the configuration tells CRM how to actually run this workflow. So the default for workflow is to run in the background. Okay, so that is run as an asynchronous process that happens after whatever else is going on with the CRM record you're working on. So this is the default, and we'll talk about the real-time option later on. But by default, it runs in the background. We can also run it on an on-demand basis. And what this means, I would like to run it by hand. So as I mentioned earlier, you can actually click a button that says Run Workflow. You pick the workflows. And what shows up on the list is any workflow who has this box checked. If this box is not checked, it will not show up on the list. And then finally, you can choose to run a workflow as the child process of another workflow. These last two can be changed at any point in time, so you can turn these things on and off if you wish. So if you have a workflow that you want to run from another workflow or call from another workflow, then you have to have that box checked. Otherwise, it will never show up on the selection list. So workflow job retention. So this setting is turned on by default, and what this says is anytime I run this workflow, if it completes successfully, as in it doesn't have an error, I want to delete the record that it ran. In 99% of all cases, I turn this off because you want to be able to know if your workflow actually ran. If it ran successfully and it deleted the record of it running, you don't know if it ran at all. So what I do is I always turn this off for my workflows if it's something that I need to verify happened. If it's something I could really care less if it ran or not, maybe it's doing some kind of update of something that's just needs to be done, then probably I will turn it off. It also depends on frequency. If it gets run a lot, maybe that we don't want to clog up the system with too many of these things. And then what I do is I use a bulk delete job, we'll talk about in a little bit, to actually delete the workflows after the fact, but a long enough period of time where I can make sure that we don't have a problem anywhere. So I always turn this one off. Another thing that we have is something called a scope. So the scope is the how the workflow is going to run in relation to the person who launched it. So most of the time, you're going to choose organization. So what this means is I would like to run this workflow on a record that is created by anyone. The default, however, is user. So what I see a lot of people doing is they create a workflow and like, well, my workflow didn't run when John over there created this record. Well, that's because you had to set the user, so that means it's only going to probably work for your records. And again, this is a kind of a it's not a maintenance thing. It's a performance thing. If you have a lot of users and a lot of automation going on, sometimes it's actually good to restrict certain workflows to only work within certain areas of CRM so that they don't run all the time everywhere when they may not be useful in everywhere. So again, most of the time, this is going to be set to organization. I've really never ever had to change it, but again, maybe I just didn't get into the large enough circumstance where it would make sense to do that. Start when tells you when you should actually start the workflow. What actually happens whenever you define a workflow, the step doesn't show up anymore, but a long time ago, we would have a system job on a specific record called a workflow expansion task. So those of you who have been around before 2013, I think, probably remember seeing that, and there's probably a bunch of them. And basically what happens is it takes a look at the record, and it takes a look at the workflows defined, and it sees, do I need to run this workflow or not run this workflow? And then what happens is if it turns out that the criteria was met to run the workflow, the next thing that you will see is the actual workflow running. Otherwise, it will not run the workflow. So you can run the workflow when it's record's created, when the status changes, when the record is assigned, when certain fields change within the workflow or within the record, or when the record is deleted. So you can run on any of these things or all of these things. These are all check boxes, and they're not mutually exclusive, as you can see. Most of the time when you're creating a workflow, it's going to either be when the record is created or when a field changes. And what you do when you check that box, the select button appears active. And what you do is you go in and select the specific fields that you want to run whenever the workflow, whenever fields change. So the idea is you only want to run the workflow when, say, the account number changes, or maybe the address changes, I need to go and do something else, or whatever it might be. Some specific field, so you don't want the workflow running every single time, only when certain things happen. So let's talk about the workflow steps themselves. So these are the ones that actually do the work. So here's a list of the default steps that we have. So we have basically a stage, which is a categorization, different checks, different weights, and then different actions that we have. So let's go through each one of those. So when you're working with steps, it's important to remember a few pretty simple rules. You can add new ones, you can delete things, and you can insert them either above or below the currently selected, so let me say stage, let me say step there, sorry about that, the current step. You can never, ever, unfortunately, move or disable a step. So what happens is if you accidentally put something in the wrong place or it's indented and running underneath something else, you're stuck. Your only option is to delete it and recreate it. And let me tell you, when you're creating a bunch of stuff and you realize that you started the process and you accidentally had something selected where you're underneath something else and you're 5 or 6 steps in there and you have to delete all 5 or 6 steps to start over, it's not a fun process. So one of the ways that you can organize the layout of your workflow is a thing called a stage. So a stage is nothing more than a grouping of steps. It has really nothing to do with the actual running of the workflow or anything else like that. It's really used to organize things so that if you have a lot of steps or maybe a lot of steps and or maybe just a few steps and a clearly defined process with major stages within the process, it's good to actually create stages and then put the steps inside the stage. Now, once you start using stages, all the steps have to be underneath or belong to a stage. There's no way to do it otherwise. So the top level is going to be a stage, and then below that is the actual step. So like I said, this is really good if you have a clearly defined process to where you want to be able to kind of see where things are visually, because when a workflow is running, you can actually open that workflow and see for that individual record where it is within the flow, and sometimes being able to have stages that let you see things a little bit better or more clearly. So a check condition is an if statement. So it will check a condition that you define. It could be anything from a data value or something going on within the workflow engine itself. And if it's true, you can have it execute certain stages or certain steps below that. If it's not true, you can have what they call a conditional branch, which is an else statement that can run on top of that. So you say, okay, if this condition is true, then run these steps. If it's not true, then run these steps. Then there's a default action, which is like the final else. So what happens is if nothing of these things is true, then I want you to do this thing. Okay, so it's the final. Otherwise, it's probably not the right word to use, but I kind of ran out of terminology here. We can also specify conditions that we wait for. So for instance, if we want to wait to run the workflow until, say, say we're working opportunity and we want to wait for the probability to reach 50%, and then we go and do something. We could actually have it wait for that specific thing to happen before we actually continue. That's probably a bad example, but that's the general idea. So you can wait for things to happen. A parallel wait branch is kind of weird. Quite honestly, I think I may have used this only once or twice in all of my workflow work. But this is the idea where you have a wait condition and then you have an else statement or otherwise. So the idea is you have your primary wait condition and then you have an otherwise wait condition. So it's like, okay, I'm going to wait for this thing. And if that doesn't happen, I'm going to wait for this other thing too. And then that way you can, the way that they were defining it in the documentation is you can actually have a secondary thing happen so that the workflow is not waiting forever. Okay, so let's get into where we're starting to work with the data and manipulating things. So the first thing we can do is we can create a CRM record, and pretty much you can create just about any kind of CRM record. I'm not sure what the limitations on that are, but pretty much anything you can create by hand, you can create with the workflow. You can put properties in that are static or dynamic, and by static I mean you type in a value, or dynamic you can pull things out of the system. You can put in things that are inside the workflow engine or the environment itself. You can pull things out from other records related to this record, depending on what it is. So you can put values that are dynamic to the working environment. Updating works exactly the same as the create. So it's working normally on the current record that you launched against, but you can also update records that are not the current record. And again, the properties can be static or dynamic. You can assign a record. So you can have a thing. So this would be like if you have some kind of workflow that distributes leads amongst your sales team, this will do that. So you would make a determination about who to give it to, and then you would assign it to the team or the user, depending on the situation, depending on what happened with logic. We can also send an email. So if you have never noticed within Dynamics CRM, the creation of an email and the sending of an email are two totally different functions. So you can create emails. So that would be the create record. So you can actually create an email. You can assign that email to somebody. That email does not get sent. It merely gets created. So when they look in their activities, they actually see the email. This step physically sends an email using whatever methodology that you have within your system. And depending on who it's sent from is how that happens. So it can be sent from the administrator. It can be sent from the user. Say if you have a process where you're updating the customer as to the status of their project or their job or whatever it might be, you could reach a stage within the workflow where you automatically send an email to that person, and you would make it come from the person who is the owner of the account or the contact, and that way it looks like it's coming from them. You know, the caveat to that is you have to make sure that your email configuration for that user is set up properly so that your emails don't go into a pending state within the system. So we can start a child workflow. So this is the ability to start another workflow from within the first workflow. So again, just it's a parent-child relationship, and you can do this all the time. We'll talk about this in best practices here in a minute. So an action is something new that they added to, what was it? I can't remember now, 2015? So an action is what they call a custom message. So the idea here is Dynamics CRM has a series of messages within the system. So these are internal things. A message would be like create, update, delete, retrieve, win opportunity, things like that. So that's what the actual programming system behind the scenes looks at. Well, you can create your own, and what happens inside an action is you can combine things together into a single step. So I actually have not had to do this for anyone yet, but the idea would be you create something that does 2 or 3 things one after the other. It's one action with multiple steps within it. And this is how you do this, by performing an action. And again, an action is nothing but another process that you defined earlier. If you remember back a few slides, we talked about the different types of processes. One of them is action. So we have workflows, dialogue, business process flows, and actions. So maybe we'll do a webinar on that. Like I said, I haven't actually, I've only seen 1 or 2 people reference they were actually working on something like that. Those are other MVPs. If anybody else has done an action, I would love to hear what you've done with it. So save that to the end and share with us if you will. We can change the status of a record. So this happens a lot where we reach a point in time where something is going on where most of the time we're going to disable a record or complete it, depending what it might be. Every now and then we'll reactivate a record, but that very rarely happens. I'm not even sure you could do that. You could do it manually, I guess. Run a workflow against the record so you could reactivate it. That's possible. But most of the time you're changing the state to deactivate it of some type. Okay. Stop in a workflow. So all this does is it just stops the execution of the workflow. The key here is there's a status associated with the stop workflow. In all honesty, you see the word canceled there? Forget it's even there. Don't ever, ever, ever cancel a workflow or stop a workflow with a cancel status. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the idea here is the workflow worked perfectly. You just got to a point where you wanted to stop it, and you made that decision. Therefore, it was successful, but we stopped. Okay, and it can happen. So if you have a large decision tree or flow that you go through, at some point you may just want to quit in the middle of it because whatever state you were in at that point, there was nothing else for you to do. So rather than having to just fall through the execution of any other possible steps, we just stop at that point in time. But if we stop it with a status of cancel, it can screw up our management that we'll talk about in a minute. So again, there's really no reason at all in my mind for you to ever stop a workflow with canceled as a status. It's always successful. So let's talk a little bit about background versus real-time workflows. So normally, as I discussed at the very beginning, when you create a workflow, it's going to be a background workflow. That means it's actually physically run by the CRM async service, which is going to be installed either on your CRM server or on a different server, depending on your configuration, or if you're on CRM Online, it's probably going to be on a different server. But you can also have a real-time workflow. And what happens when you create a real-time workflow is it actually functions more like a synchronous plugin that you've written rather than a workflow. So it runs immediately once the criteria that you specify, we'll talk about in a minute, when it's met. But you can't have any wait or delay steps within that because it's actually interacting with the user, quite honestly. And it also runs in the current transaction. Now, this is kind of important because of the way that CRM does their database work. So when you do something to a CRM record, again, everything is SQL based. So it actually starts a transaction at the beginning of the process. And then if everything was fine at the end of it, it commits that transaction and it actually gets written to the database. If anything goes wrong within that transaction or within the process, it will physically roll back the SQL transaction. Anything that happened with that record or any other records within that transaction will also be rolled back. And so for those of you who are not SQL people, what that means is a rollback is undoing anything that happened within the steps of between the begin the transaction and the commit of the transaction. So what it will actually go is throw it all away. Okay. Well, normally what happens is when you run a workflow in the background, it's actually run as a totally different transaction because the work on the main record has finished. And then at a later time, depending on your throughput of your system and your async service, you will actually run that as a separate transaction later on. Real-time workflows run within the same transaction as pretty much the user. So anything that will actually happen visibly to the user here. So to convert from a background to a real-time or vice versa, there's a checkbox that's grayed out, and it's grayed out because you have to push a button. They didn't want it to be simple. They wanted to make you very, very clear what you're doing here. So you click the convert to real-time, or it will actually revert back to background if you've already done that. You click that button, it will convert it to a real-time workflow, and it will display this box. So again, the scope is the same. Okay, then we have the different starts and wins and stuff like that. So the scope is pretty much the same as it is for background. So user, business unit, parent, child, business units, and organization. Our start win, we can create it after a record is created, before or after the status changes, after a record is assigned, when the field is changed, or before a record is deleted. Okay. Execute as is something that's kind of interesting, and it's only available on the real-time workflows, not on the background. You can choose to run a real-time workflow as either the owner of the workflow or the user who made the changes to the record. Okay, let's have a show of hands if anybody can tell me why that is, and I'll unmute your mic and you can tell me. Anybody? Okay, Rob, you're unmuted. Why is this important?
It's basically a concern with the security roles. You have to have the ability to change it to use the user one. Whereas if you're the owner and say you're the admin, you can pretty much do it as you want. But if you're a user who made the change to the record and you don't have security permissions to say write to a record, it'll fail.
Exactly. Good job. Yeah, so what Rob's talking about is basically if you run it as the owner of the workflow, sometimes that person has a different security level than the person who actually started the workflow. So normally in the background, it runs as whoever owns the record. Owns the workflow. But if you want to run it under the context of the user, you can run as real time and select the user who made the changes to the record. So this is a new thing. It's actually it's got a lot of power. It doesn't seem like it. It's just a selection, but it can be quite good. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about troubleshooting management. So there are actually two types of failures within the workflow system. The first is actually a soft failure. So it doesn't actually have the word failure. What happens is it gets stuck in what they call a waiting condition. Now, there are true waiting conditions. That means you're literally waiting on something to happen, and it does happen depending on how you write your workflows. The next one is a hard failure, where the status of the workflow is actually failed. So the difference between those two is the fails are really easy to spot because they blatantly say failed. The soft failures are hard to spot because they just say waiting. So then you have to go check, is it really waiting or is it failed waiting? Okay, hang on a second. Okay, sorry, Ben had a question there. I didn't see it. Back on the real-time workflows. Ben had a question. Do changes made with the real-time workflow show up on the form you are in, or must you refresh the form to see them? Ben, if I'm not mistaken, depending how it works, what you're changing, it will actually show up on the form. So, okay, back to the workflow failures here. Okay, so again, the problem with solve failures is they're hard to spot. A solve failure can be spotted because there is a field called message, and in the box here at the bottom, and this is basically this is from an open workflow, workflow instance. You see this message has been filled out. What you do is you check to see if the message field is blank, and we do that by creating a personal view. So what I do here is I have a few personal views, and I'll talk more about this in our maintenance class we're going to have next week. But I'm just monitoring this stuff on a regular basis. So again, I'm looking for failed records. I'm looking for waiting records. And what I do is I look for this message field to contain data. The message field is only, and repeat, only filled out if there's an error. If it functions properly, there will be no errors. Okay, and therefore the message field will be blank. So what you do is you create a personal view, which is an advanced find, and say, okay, look for system jobs with the message containing data. Okay, and then what I do is I monitor that on a weekly or daily or whatever basis to look for patterns. Okay, so that helps me spot the failed messages. One of the things I do to clean up stuff is remember earlier I said do not check the box that says delete workflow history if it's successful or whatever it said. Again, I don't do that because if it ran, I have no idea it ran properly. And sometimes that is an issue, especially when you have CRM on premises where occasionally the async service will shut off and you won't know it. The only way you'll know it is you'll notice all of a sudden there's no system jobs. And so it's kind of a big deal. So what I do is I create this bulk delete job that I run every 7 days or every 30 days, depending on the level of activity. I said, okay, if the status reason is equal to succeeded, if it's older than 1 month, and the job type is equal to workflow, then delete the record. And this run every 7 days, and we'll delete things that are over 30 days old. This has only bitten me one time to where we actually found a problem on literally day 31, and we literally had lost 1 day. The job ran 31 days ago. The bulk delete job had just run, so it deleted it like that morning before we started looking at it. But this is the way you do it. And you can do several other things like this too. So you can do failed workflows, other things to do bulk cleanup. Okay, best practices. So let's talk about some performance if you're on premises. CRM Online already has their way. They've got everything configured, different servers and different scale groups and all the other good stuff that goes with it. But when you're on premises, depending on your load, number of users, number of activities you're doing, all the other stuff, it may be good for you to actually create multiple CRM asynchronous servers. Okay. If you ever get into that predicament to where your async service is either using too much memory or it's too slow or your system is slower, the first thing you actually do is to create a new server, doesn't matter what kind it is, just a Windows server, put the async service on that one, and then turn off the one that is on your CRM server. Okay, just disable the actually starting up of that. That will save you probably most of the work that you have to do, strictly because what happens is the server will get into a fight, or it will kind of try to manage a fight between the async service and IIS. And depending on how things are actually working on your server, usually nobody wins. Hang on a second. So by moving that service off to its own machine, you actually will free up resources that allows IIS to run better and the async service to run better, and everybody's happy. If it gets above that, say you have a lot of users and a lot of activities going on, you can add additional async servers, sorry. There seems to be I'm not going to say the maximum number is 4, but the maximum practical number is 4. This comes from the CRM support team, and we were talking, it's like they just don't really see an advantage of going over 4 because you end up having some contention issues to where it's trying to figure out how to distribute the load more than it's actually working on the load. So when that happens, sometimes it's easier to just limit it to 4. And that's for a very, very, very large system. Most systems that I've worked with, which is the, say, 50 to 250 users, having your async service on a different machine just about fixes everything as far as the processing of this stuff goes. Okay, some best practices here. It's actually better to have smaller workflows that you can call from a parent. So you'll have one main workflow. So let's say, for instance, I had a workflow one time that ran an opportunity, and they had 6 stages of the opportunity. And each stage had a series of checkboxes that had to be completed before it could move to the next stage. And what happened was a workflow that ran, anytime any of these fields were updated, it would go and check to see if they were all updated. And if so, they advanced the opportunity to the next stage of operation. If not, they just called the workflow and it ran again, waited again. Well, it would have been a workflow that was probably about 30 feet long if we had done it all in one. So what we did is we broke it out into 6 small workflows and then a master workflow or a parent. And all the parent did was to run the child workflows one at a time. Okay, so that's the best practice there. Every now and then you need to look at your workflows and see if you're actually using them. This may seem kind of silly, but as time goes on, as administrators come and go, as management changes their mind about how they're running the company, you end up with workflows that do stuff that you have no idea about. I also use the word remove here. Don't disable the workflows. What I do, if you don't want them anymore, but you're kind of scared to delete them, what I do is I move them into I make a solution referencing those, export them out as unmanaged solution, and then delete them from the system. And the reason you do that is because you don't know if they're used or not, and it's very easy to have them accidentally reactivated by someone who doesn't know that they're not to be used than it is not to have them at all. So that's kind of something I've seen people kind of get bitten by that, where they turned them off, and then the new administrator turned them on accidentally because either they moved a solution around or they thought they had to be on or whatever, and next thing you know, they're firing off and they're not supposed to. So every now and then, take a look at your workflows and see if you're actually using them the way you're supposed to. So let's talk about extending workflows here. So we went through the standard things that CRM does within the workflow engine, and it's good for the basic stuff, but I guarantee you sooner or later you're going to need to do more stuff. And it could be simple stuff, it could be complicated stuff. So the way that you get around these limitations is by creating something called a custom workflow activity. So this is just a .NET DLL that you create, and these are C# or VB.NET. And then you register it with the plugin registration tool. And what this does is it gives the workflow engine additional steps that will allow you to do stuff. And once it's registered, it will show up in the workflow designer, and you can't tell the difference between your code and their code. So here are some things, and these are all going to be emailed out to you, by the way. So if you're listening to this live, or you're registered for this, I'll mail it to you. If you're going to be listening later, I'll have a link for you on the page for this webinar. But here are several sets of workflows that are in existence. They have been out there for a long time. This is just a few that I picked out that from people I know. There are probably much more comprehensive lists out there. But MS CRM workflow utilities, they've got things like delete record, share, insert hyperlink, qualify lead, et cetera, et cetera. Jason Latimer, another MVP, has several specific to different tasks. He has date time workflows, so working with dates and times, emails, strings, numbers. And then 0 to 10 came up a couple years ago with a tool that was written for CRM 2011, but I think it probably worked with 2013 and above as well. And what this allows you to do is to actually apply a workflow against I think it's a view, and it will actually run the workflow for all of the records in the result set instead of just a few at a time. Okay, enough with all the stuff. Who would like to see workflow being created? Anybody? A few of you? Okay. Whoops. Okay, so this is actually here in 2015 online. This is one of my instances. I haven't actually gotten it upgraded to 16 yet. Has anybody gotten theirs a request to upgrade to 16 yet? I have not seen one, so I'm not sure what the plan is for that. I know it's soon, but I don't know when. Okay, first thing you do again is you name it. My name is Demo 3. My category is going to be a workflow, and my entity is going to be, let's say, a lead, since I don't use leads. Okay, remember, once you press that OK button, you cannot change the category or the lead, or sorry, the entity. And so what you do is you make sure you do that before you click OK. Otherwise, you have to delete the workflow. So I click that, and it's going to pop up. And this is the workflow designer. Okay, so as we covered earlier, we can have process template. We can change the name here if we want to. We can change the scope. Again, always do it to organization. Need to make a determination. Are we going to do this when the record's created, or just when it changes, or the status changes, or things like that? Okay. Do it on demand or as a child process. A lot of times what you do, at least what I do kind of automatically, is I almost always set the on demand, strictly because sooner or later I'm going to test this thing out, and I want to test it out by hand. So I'll turn that on again. If you don't turn that on, it won't show up in the list of things you can do. Likewise, if you have the as child process, if this is not checked, you will not be able to run it from another workflow. Again, it's just a simple checkbox. So if you think there's ever a time that you wanted to use this stuff, then do that. But remember, this on-demand thing will be shown every single time somebody goes to run a workflow. So if you have a lot of workflows, you could actually maybe confuse users a bit. Again, I almost always turn that off. Okay. Now, I've got a very big screen here, as you can see, and one of the first things you can do to give yourself more editing space down here where the steps are is this little bitty drop down arrow right there. Okay, look at that. I bet nobody knew that happened. Okay, so anyway, that will actually hide all that stuff at the top. So if you have a situation where you have a low resolution monitor, that can save a lot of time. It takes 2 or 3 inches out. So again, it can add a step. As you can see, I've got some other things down here. These are all custom. So some of these are click dimensions. Some of these are things I wrote. I don't know which one's which. And then everything else. So for instance, if we want to create a record, all we do is select create record, select the record type. Let's create a case, and select the properties. Okay, and again, we can specify either static variables or dynamic. So a dynamic variable is, say we go into the description here, and I would like to take a value out of here. So I'm going to look in the lead, and I would like to put in the email address of the lead. Can add that, and then click OK. I can also specify a default value. Say no email. And that puts this thing over here. Okay, so anytime you have a dynamic variable, which is what these things are called, it'll show up in yellow. They're kind of very, I would say persnickety, but I'm not sure everybody knows what it is. They're very delicate, put it that way, these things. Sometimes you can copy them and move them around. Most of the time, if you need to put them somewhere else, say this is a big text box and we want to put them in there. A lot of times what I do is I just delete them and put the cursor where I want it to be and stick them in there that way. Otherwise, sometimes it just doesn't work right. Some of the fields that you cannot change here. Some of the fields, what will happen is so here's the origin. So let's say this came from the website. And let's set the contact to be the customer. Okay. And then what I'm going to do, let's see if I can, you know what? Let me go look for this. I'm going to say process, execution time. Is that going to work? Maybe it did. So this is a mixture of both static text and dynamic text. So what it'll say is it's going to be a case from the website and the execution process time. So basically execution time of the process, which is the time it actually launched. So that'll write it in there. Okay. Now, one thing about this, you'll notice whenever I am working over here on this list, anytime I click into a field, my list of available values to put into that field will be specific to the field type. So right now I'm in customer, which means I can only put in on case things that are an account or a contact in this case. And it will vary again depending on your entity and field. Okay, so that is that. So what will happen is, so this is the default case form. What will happen is you will see all the things that are on the case form as a normal user would see it. Then at the very bottom, you have all of the other fields that are not on the case form. Okay, so the idea here is if you need to update a field that is not on the form, you can do it through this. So any additional field will be listed at the bottom here. Okay, because it does happen occasionally, especially if you're in a situation where you have multiple forms. And what you can do is just have it update the field, and then it's in the database regardless, so it can be displayed, somewhat on a different form or whatever it might be. So occasionally this does happen. The problem with form design, and I think we're going to cover this in next week's webinar as well, and I wrote a little article about it about 2 or 3 weeks ago. If you have disabled the field on the form, it's disabled here. It's the same form. So what you have to do is either have a different form that lists the fields like these, or you have to have a process where you make the field read write, publish the form, go and modify your workflow, and then go back and make the field read only, and then publish it, or you can use JavaScript or something like that. Okay, but that is a problem with this. So yeah, so if you have a form, and what I did is I had a form that was 100% read only, nobody was to ever put anything into it, and I went to modify it with a workflow and realized that I had basically all my fields are grayed out, which means I couldn't modify them. And then I found a CRM tip that Joel had written, Joel Lindstrom, that basically what he did is he created a secondary administration form that had all the fields on it that were not read only, and that was only available to system administrators. Okay, so a little trick there. Okay, so save and close. Now, the white line right above the step, or actually the kind of the beginning of the step, that's the description. Okay, so It's not mandatory, but a lot of times what happens is, depending on the step itself, the description is actually referenced in other parts of the workflow designer. So what happens is if you don't put a step in there or a good description, it will not actually show up in a reliable manner in other places. So if we're trying to pull data off of something, it can cause a problem. Okay. So anyway, so that's a create. Like I said, we could do a wait. So let's do a wait. So I'm going to create that. And I click on that little link that says click to configure. Whoops, sorry. I am going to wait on the process. We'll wait a timeout of equals 1 day after the lead was created. So what this is saying, I'm going to wait for 1 day after the creation of this workflow. Okay, so it's process timeout equals 1 day after created on. And that will wait 1 day after the record was created. And once I have that, I go in here and I can do maybe a check. So let's do a check. Here's a check. Okay, I'm going to check on my case. Okay. Remember, I just told you about naming your steps. Create a new case. Create a new case right there. That's why you do that. So I'm going to say, okay, I went and created a case in step 1. Now I need to go check that thing to see if the status equals resolved. Okay. If it does equal resolve, I am going to stop the workflow as succeeded. Okay. Then I'm going to put my cursor right here. Now, again, when you start working with these things, it's going to be, it's very important to make sure that you know where you are within the system. And what happens is, if you're not aware of where you are within this designer, you can put things in the wrong place, and again, you can't move them. So I'm going to put it here, and I'm going to put in a default action, which otherwise, see they're lined up, if, and then otherwise, I'm going to go and create an email, create and send an email, sorry, create a new message, create a new message from a template. Let's see what kind of templates we have. I don't know. Let's go look. Okay, case. Do we have any case templates in our CRM system? I don't know. Let's see. Global template. There's a case template. Case escalation. This is working out. Oh my God, it's a demo. Yay. Okay. Whoops. Want to do that? I think that's all I have to do. Okay. So what we're doing here is a lead comes in. We wait for a day. We create a new case. Actually, we create a new case. Then we wait for a day. We check the case status. If it's equal to resolve, we quit. If it's not equal to resolve, we escalate the case by sending an email to our internal people. Okay, so that's a very simple thing. It's probably not really simple, but this is a kind of a typical thing. Tom asked, "What do you?" Let's see, Tom or Vaughn, sir? No, Tom. No, Vaughn asked about wait or timeout. So we have two different types of waits. We have a wait for a condition and a wait for a period of time. That's really and truly what this is. So A timeout is you're going to wait for a period of time depending on an action. Like what we did is we waited for 1 day after the lead's created on value. Okay. A wait condition, we're going to wait for a thing to happen. So in other words, most of the time, a change in data. So we're going to wait for the case to be resolved, or we're going to wait for the lead to be qualified, whatever it might be. So that's kind of how I look at it. You're waiting for a period of time, that's a timeout. You're waiting for a condition of data, that's a wait. Let's see, Tom says, notice that you have extra options under the add step button made inside the workflow. Tom, those, he's talking about these down here. I have click dimensions installed here. At least one of those is theirs, maybe both of these. The bottom two are mine. I created. Um, that doesn't work, but it was a test system I was working on. Round Robin, it was a product that assigned leads or contacts or accounts to a team in a round robin fashion. Okay, Hong has asked me a question that I hope I can answer. So he's talking about a parallel wait. Okay, so let's go add a wait condition. Okay, now, what did I tell you about watching where you were in the thing? Can anybody tell me what I did wrong? Anybody? Whoop. Sorry about that. Munir, I would have pronounced that right. Yes, I left my highlight in the wrong place. I don't want this wait condition down here. This is under the timeout. Okay. So again, I had it in the wrong place. So I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to click on this step here. Whoops. I'm going to click on this step here because I want this to be at the same level as the other one. Okay. Then I can add my wait. There we go. Now that's better. Again, simple thing, happens all the freaking time. Okay. So if you've ever created a workflow of any complexity at all, I guarantee you've done this at least once. If not, more power to you. I don't know how you did it because everybody gets in a hurry and they don't look where they're clicking. Okay, let's wait for the lead. Let's see. Say email. Contains data. Okay, so we're going to wait for this it's going to stay there until the thing contains data. Then we're going to have a parallel wait branch. It says, otherwise, I'm going to wait until this thing happens. Until, how about we do a process timeout equals 1 day afterwards, after the lead was created. And then I am going to put a check condition. I'm going to check the lead email. Does not contain data. And if that's the case, I'm going to send an email to the account manager. Okay. It's going to the owner of the user. Not that I have a heavy stick, but I just like people to do stuff. So what this is going to do is going to email this very unnice message to the owner of the lead regarding the lead, and it's going to basically email them to manage the customer. Maybe I should put in there why I'm upset, but that's fine. That's the idea. So basically, I'm going to wait for that to contain data, or I'm going to wait for a day and then check anyway. So that's it. All it is an or condition for a wait statement. Huh? Does that help? Okay. So that's all well, let me see. Yeah, that's all I really have right now for as far as discussions and stuff goes, or as far as demos and stuff goes. So let's open it up. If you want to just put your hand up, and if you got any questions, or you can either type them into the question box, or you can raise your hand, and we'll just get them answered. How about that? Or again, if you have something to share, then hey, let's do it. Anybody? When you're asked, is there any way to edit the workflows outside of CRM? No, unfortunately. This stuff, so I also sell a tool for documentation called Snapshot. And if I could document this stuff right here, man, I would. I really, truly would, but I can't. It's stored in, I can get what they call XAML out, ZAML, which is the XML markup language. I can pull that out, but I can't get to the things I need to make it work. The only thing that I think I found that might work, and I can try it right now. Let's see if it works. So I use a product called Snagit. Does everybody use Snagit? If you don't, you should. It's really cheap and it's really valuable. It takes screenshots or videos. So if I try to get here, so what I've done, this is the Snagit thing, and I hope it's still showing on GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar. So what it's saying here, that little box at the bottom is saying, hey, you're in a scrollable region. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here and click that, and it's going to scroll my box, and then it's going to give me the scrolled version of that box. This is the closest as documentation as I found. Okay, unfortunately. You have to do this manually. There could be some version differences with browsers. You never can tell. Like I said, it's one of those things where who knows if it's actually going to work every single time. Like let's try it again. Just see what I'm talking about. Okay, so now I have a scroll within a scroll. Let's see what it does this time. Okay. So this time it didn't work because what it's doing, it's not capturing the internal box. Let's try it one more time just to be safe. It's not seeing this internal box. It's just seeing the external, and I don't know. Yeah, that's not going to work. So anyway, but yeah, Snagit is the closest I found. If anybody has any other thing else, it might not work. Let's see. Ben asked, can you send emails via workflow if you do not use? Oh, absolutely, Ben. So can you send emails from workflow if you don't use the CRM Outlook client? Absolutely, but you have to have some methodology for sending them. That's either going to be the server-side sync or it's going to be the email router, one of the two. Okay. The point I was using earlier about the having the Outlook client installed, it doesn't matter if that client installed at all. What matters is the personal options for the individual user about what their email methodology is. So you have on the these days they call it the mailbox record. If you're 2013, 11 below, it's just on the user record itself, and it's inbound and outbound email. If you have it set to email router or server-side sync, it will use those technologies, assuming they're available. Where you get into problems with when you create a new user, the default for that setting is Outlook. If you do not install the Outlook client, the emails created via workflow will sit there inside the system as pending emails. So what you have to do is occasionally, go out and look. As administrator, unless you turn it off, most of the time when you log into CRM, it'll pop a box up and say you have pending emails. You have to go look. I had a customer one time, and I'm just wandering around doing maintenance one day, and I was like, well, let me go check that. I haven't checked it in a while, and I found they were like, this one user had like 76 emails. Well, what had happened was she was responsible for the registration of users for this conference, and they were sending out the conference registration confirmation via workflow using her email address or her user as the from. Her user was set to Outlook client. She didn't have Outlook client installed, so the emails were just sitting there. So I had to go up and tell her, so hey, I'm about to change this setting, and all these emails are going to go out, and I have no idea what's going to happen after that, but I'm going to fix this. So that's a thing you got to watch for, is you have a disconnect between the configuration of the user and how people are using the system. Sean asks, can we create a button on a form to assign a manual workflow instead of using the default workflow selection box? Yes. Go out to develop1.net. That's the develop and the number 1.net. Scott Duro, he's the guy who created the Ribbon Workbench. He has a thing built into Ribbon Workbench to run a workflow, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see. Anybody else? Hong says he documents the workflow by printing the workflow to PDF. Yeah, that pretty much works. That's what I was doing with the Snagit there, is trying to capture it. Unfortunately, it's not a good thing. You can also do just screenshots and manually paste them together. That works too. I sure as heck wish I could build it in a snapshot, but like I said, I spent time and money trying to do it, and it was just it's actually physically impossible because of the internal workings of the workflow and the way that it's the technology is. I don't have access to stuff, so I could fake it to a degree with on premises. I couldn't do it at all with online. Anybody else have any questions? No? Okay, great. Hey, it's been a pleasure today. Again, I'm going to send an email out probably later today or first thing Saturday morning with a summary of everything we talked about, with links to the tools and stuff. The YouTube recording will be up later today too. It takes a couple hours to process and get uploaded and things like that. But if anything pops up, then hey, let me know. Again, thanks for coming, and we'll talk to you soon.